Hello, hello, and welcome to the show. This episode is brought to you by The Wellness Paradigm, a holistic health coaching company centered around how women understand and heal their bodies. Through bioenergetic testing, functional lab testing, and functional nutrition, we uncover what traditional approaches often overlook so you can stop guessing and start healing and finally feel like yourself again. No more one size fits all approaches, just real answers, deep rooted healing, and the clarity and confidence you deserve to feel incredible. It's time to shift the paradigm of women's health. Now, on to the show. Hello, hello, Andrew. Guys, I am so excited to be bringing Andrew onto the show. You are going to get so much insight from everything that he says. He's going to draw you in, but he is an incredible international expert in bringing brain-based voice training into the world of singing. He applies his work all over the world with Broadway stars, TEDx speakers, entrepreneurs, and so many more. And he also has a very cool bestseller book as well called The Singing Athlete. And he's traveled all across the country sharing this very unique specialty. And so I'm really excited to bring him on for him to share his knowledge. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Shannon, so much. I'm so happy to be here with you.
Yes, me too. And before we even started recording this podcast, we had an incredible conversation. So it's going to be hard to fit it all into this one podcast, but I do want you to share kind of your background, how this whole system came to be, because it's so fascinating. So the floor is yours.
Yeah, so my company is called The Singing Athlete, and it grew out of my own history as a musician and an injured musician. So I grew up as a singer and as a pianist. I put myself through school playing for piano, playing for voice lessons and performances. That was my job to earn money. And I was always really good at it. I was a natural at it. And that is good and bad because my teachers would go, I don't know, you sound great. Let's play Beethoven. And I wasn't getting any kind of physical instruction on what I was doing. And so then along the way, I moved to New York. I booked a job on Broadway playing in the pit orchestra of Les Miserables on Broadway. And that was the highest level of stress I had ever come across. That's like jumping on a moving train. I started Les Mis 13 years into the run. So it was
Wow.
pretty sad. So you had to kind of time your jump right to jump in to be able to play in that orchestra. And while doing that, I started to have an injury that I'd had occasionally before, but then it started to get really bad where my left elbow would be in intense pain when I was playing. And so my history is that I have an inguinal hernia that was repaired when I was 4 years old on my
Mm,
left side, and it was my left elbow that was really hurting me. And so I didn't know why that was, but I was young and I was like, oh, I'll probably be okay.
yeah.
And then I booked a job out of town, out of New York, doing the musical Ragtime, which is my personal favorite musical.
Mm.
This was the era of The Secret back in the day when you secreted things. So I was secreting I was going to do Ragtime, and then I actually got a job to conduct Ragtime. And that's when it started to get really bad. So I would start the Ragtime's a 3 hour show like Les Mis. I would start the first notes and my elbow would throb. And this was in the early aughts. It was before YouTube, where you can go look up a bunch of stretches. So I was in whatever random city trying to figure out what to do. Got worse and worse pain. At that point, I started to get other symptoms like my left hand would be bright red at the end of the show. My
Mm.
right hand would look normal. I would get tingling, like nerve symptoms down my hand. And I thought I was never going to play the piano again without pain. And I feel like I am on earth to be a musician. That is the thing that I love the most in life. And I was having to look into other careers. I thought it was just done for me in music. But the
Mm.
thought of that was so depressing to me that I thought there's actually no point in living if I can't have music. And so I thought, well, I can either just give up or I can devote all of my resources to fixing myself. So I cut my schedule to nothing and I studied Pilates, I studied gyrotonic, I studied Alexander technique, and took a lot of private coachings with various smart physical people. And through that process, started to heal. Then a little later was led to a brain-based focus, which is what I now do, which is still physical training, but looking at it through a neurobiomechanical lens. Like, what is the brain telling us in various movements? And that was kind of the final piece for me that allowed me to come back to a full performing career. And what was a fun full circle moment for me is that I spent the last 2 months of 2024 conducting a show that I helped to create called Mama, I'm a Big Girl Now, which was with three Broadway stars who were in the musical Hairspray. And the four of us created the show together. And I did a whole run of a New York show with big amount of stress, but no pain. And so that
Mm.
was a very full circle. And I often say that I call my business the science of hope because it is grounded in anatomy and it's grounded in things that are scientific principles, but it is essentially a hopeful practice to go, I thought I was never going to do the thing in life that I feel like I'm meant to do again. And now I get to do it every day. And so I focus my company on, in my case, singers, but anyone who needs this, the idea that whatever is holding you back, that can be resolved. And having great people like you in everyone's life too, people can provide these different ways of looking at improving function
Hmm.
and to see how that can start to resolve these long-standing things that feel intractable, that feels like it's never going to change. And I share my story because I am living proof that it can change. And it is, I don't ever touch the piano with pain or fear. And it
Mm.
was such a different experience for me 23 years ago. So that is how I came to do the company that I have. I started to think, well, now that I am feeling better, I wonder if there are principles here that can be shared with the world of singing and to show a clearer assessment process of what is going on with someone's body and their brain and how that supports their vocal function. And that is what my book is about, and that is what I now tour the world sharing with singers and musicians everywhere.
Oh, it's so, so wonderful. I think so many people who kind of get in this work have their own personal unique story, and I think it's beautiful. And why I think we connect so much is there is a very physical element to this that brought you to change, but it's a very unique blend of, neurological, nervous system work, nervous system retraining, along with and we'll talk about this a little bit, the anatomy, the physiology, the very physical and the very energetic, which is obviously what my business does too, and it's fascinating to see it intertwined because a lot of people think it's just one or the other. It's just my knee pain.
That's
No,
right.
sweetie, it's probably something else that's going on too.
That's
But
right.
I love that you say hope. Coming from
Yeah.
somebody who felt like they lost it with my autoimmune diagnosis, it's like there's so much hope. You just need to find the right rewiring, the right
Yeah.
method, right? That's going to work for you. So,
Yeah, the right team around you. And so I love your point about like I was having elbow pain. Was the problem in my elbow? No. The problem in my case started in my core, in my left abdominal muscles that were something spilled through there when I was 4 years old and I looked like I could move okay. And everyone was like, all right. And I never had any singing teacher ask me about my history. So the first chapter of my book is my own medical history because there's no shame in that.
yeah.
And the rest of the chapter is on you taking your own medical history because there are things that you may not have thought about that may be impacting it. It never occurred to me that it was coming from my hernia scar until I started doing Pilates and diatonic, and I was like, wait, now my elbow doesn't hurt as much anymore. Why? And then, many years later, it kind of came to me why that worked. But it's just a really, I think, powerful thing to have a team help you sort through that and to go, even though there may be a bright spotlight in some part of your body or some part of your experience, that doesn't mean that's actually where it's coming from. And that is where it's so good to have tools to have a different lens, a wider, a pulled back view of like what else is going on that might actually be at least initiating some of the discomfort you're feeling.
Yes, I think we won't dive too much into it, but a lot of people will view stomach pain or a knee pain as what it is, but emotions get trapped in there.
Yes,
Trauma gets trapped in there, as well as, if you have a scar or surgery, scars hold trauma, right? And it's
absolutely.
like our literal neural pathways get shifted and changed, when that happens too. So we don't understand that's happening on a very
Yeah,
conscious level.
that's
And
right.
I do want to talk about Pilates and gyrotonics because this
Yeah.
is very unique. I most people in my audience don't know it. Like I used to manage a big Pilates studio through Lifetime. Love reformer Pilates. Gyrotonics I'm familiar with. I didn't personally love it. Again, you find your own method, but
Yeah.
it really helped you. And I think
Did.
Pilates is so great for that mind-body connection. But
Mhm.
I love what you mentioned about. Tell us a little bit. We were talking
Yeah, of course.
gyrotonics.
Yeah, firstly, what's so cool about workouts is that everyone's right, meaning that if Shannon's like, I hate gyrotonic, and I'm like, I loved it, we're both right. It's
For
just so
sure.
good to try stuff to be like, and there's different needs of the nervous system. And then it's kind of cool to have coaches help you figure out, well, maybe this is why you love or hate that. And let's
Yeah.
see if we can take that information and make, in this case, a better workout for you or just a better plan for you in general. So
Yep.
why I think it worked for me is that so there are two parts of the brain that are dealing with the reflexive activation of keeping you safe and on your targets, and those are called the brain stem and the cerebellum. So the brainstem is like 10 of your 12 cranial nerves are there, and that's all these reflexive things that are keeping you alive, like pumping your heart and blinking your eyes and those kinds of things. And then you have tucked behind that this thing called the cerebellum, which is your little brain, and that is the most neuronally dense area of your brain. The most concentration of neurons is right in there. It looks like a tree. They call it the arbor vitae. So it's very, very dense with neurons because it is an integration hub. It's trying to keep all your systems talking to one another well and making a simple enough output for that. And it is essentially error correction. So if you imagine like you're reaching for a glass of water and someone hits your hand out of the way, goes, "Don't drink that water." But you're like, "No, I want the water." It's taking you back towards your targets all the time. And so the cerebellum is something you can test and you can see in people's gait. So when you're walking, if you see a shoulder that is slumped forward or a hip that is internally rotated where your leg is kind of crossing the midline when you're walking, on that side, your cerebellum may be asleep. And so that's
Mm.
what my gait looked like. My left hip would internally rotate, my left shoulder was slumped forward, i.e., causing my elbow pain. And
Mm.
when I started to do gyrotonics, so gyrotonic is, if you're not familiar with it, it's like big wheels essentially that you're making these circular motions in. So what is cool to know about physical training is that circular movement in your training is more cerebellar. The cerebellum is dealing with multiplanar movements. So if you're doing a biceps curl, you're just doing it straight up and down like this. That is less cerebellar than if you make a circle with the weight. That's going to give you more cerebellar function because there's more error correction needed when there are more planes involved. And so
Mm.
for me, when I started to do these big wheels, I started to feel better because I had a sleepy left cerebellum. And by
Mm.
actually doing circular movements that required a lot of focus from me and finesse in how I was moving, all of a sudden my core muscles started to actually do their thing. And
Mm.
then I was in less pain because I felt my center. And Pilates, of course, works with that very directly, which I also had a wonderful experience with.
Mhm.
But I just think gyrotonic is kind of cool because it's a
Right.
fairly unique thing that some people, me included, needed to work in circular movement. So I now sell a whole class on my website called Bands and Benches that is about taking the strength band out to the park, getting some sunlight, and actually doing all circular workouts. So the whole class is all circles. And I like that because it's something that it makes me feel great, but it's also cool for people to know if you are stuck in either movement patterns or thought loops that you think are holding you back, your cerebellum stops all unwanted movement, including unwanted thoughts. So if you are in this thing where you're like, I just am in this loop that I can't get myself out of, whether that's a movement problem or a thinking problem, I believe that's an area of your brain that's kind of cool to know about and maybe cool to be working out in some specific way. And as simple a nugget as what if I just move in circles when I'm doing my workout could be a really interesting thing to try.
Oh my goodness, I love that. As somebody who has been a movement specialist and done biomechanics and
Yeah.
majored in kinesiology, it's like we're taught working out to lose weight, working out to look better, but we don't understand that it's actually to feel better on a deep somatic level. People are so stuck in, I call them poop loops in their head, and
Yeah.
it's like, we can't get out of our body or
Yeah.
out of our brain and into our
Right.
body. And it's like
Yeah.
movement is literally medicine
Yes.
for the brain. And I love that you mentioned the circular because honestly, I mean, out of all of these years I've been doing this for 12 years, that has never even occurred to me that that would be a reason why
That's
somebody would really
that's
connect with that.
That's very cool. But yeah, I mean, I think moving well and thinking well go together. That is
Yeah.
actually, there is no distinction because thoughts are movement. And so to
Yeah.
say, when I'm in the poop loop, what do I need to do? Well, I need to have some sense of assessing my own body and what actually works for me. And the thing that I love, I mean, singing is an amazing assessment of that, but there's lots of other ways to assess it. There are cerebellar tests you can do.
Mhm.
Which side is weaker? Simple things like if you take your fingers and just put your finger and your thumb together as fast as you can, which side's getting tired? You can be like, well, the side's getting tired is probably my weak cerebellum side. Just like flicking your fingers like that and go, which side starts to get fatigued or less accurate? You're like, probably that side. So taking a little moment to be like, in my workout, what if I did some circular movements on that side? Or other
Mhm.
cool things about it are cerebellum controls your proximal extensors. So to be stuff like your lat or your glute, to be like, could I actually do some more specific row work or lat pull down on one side or glute bridge on one side? If I am trying to upregulate that part of my brain, there are lots of things you can be programming for yourself that will help that. And it's my opinion that that helps the poop loops because it actually helps you stay on your target and not get distracted by all those other things that are going on, because the cerebellum is trying to keep you on target. That's what its job is. And I think a lot of us can relate to that, of like, life pulls us all these other ways and we're like, I didn't actually do the thing I was supposed to be doing today because I got distracted by everything else. And you need, I think, a physical strategy potentially to get yourself to your targets.
Wonderful. That's why I love bringing people on the pod. Like every single episode, you're gonna just, even if you take away one little nugget,
Yeah.
like it's
One nugget.
so incredible. And again, we talked about this before we recorded. Like take what serves you and leave what doesn't.
Do the rest of it. Yeah.
Because everybody's body, mind, functions so differently, right?
Right.
What would you say is, you obviously work with the voice, right? So would you say the draw is probably the most kind of trapped or place that you kind of start with? Like what would you normally start with?
Yeah, it's a great question. So what I try to do is what I call assess and reassess. And so what I'm going to do is a few things with you. I'm going to take your history, but I'm also just going to watch you and go, where does my eye go? And
Mhm,
what do I notice myself being drawn to? And
mhm,
so I'm then going to try to correlate that with some kind of physical assessment. So I like to think of, in my case, 7 diaphragms of the body. So to talk through them quickly, we have 3 in our head. We have something behind our eyebrows here that's called the diaphragm ocelli. We have our soft palate, which is on the crease of your nose there behind that. And then we have the floor of your mouth, which is technically a muscle called the mylohyoid behind the point of your jaw. So I'm going to potentially push on you there, or at least watch how you move those things and try to figure out what is going on in those areas. And then as I move down the chain, I'm going to start to look at your breathing. So I'm going to look at the area right on the top of your sternum. It's called the manubrium there. That's known as a thoracic outlet or inlet, depending on whether you're talking about things coming in or out. And I'm going to see what's happening there. Are you lifting your shoulders when you breathe? Because it's really easy to test on yourself. If you're listening, put your hand on your own shoulder across, like across your center there, across your front. Take a breath and go, is my shoulder lifting? Because if it is, that's dysfunctional breathing on that side. And you can check your other side. So I'll watch for that, but also potentially test that in terms of stability. Then I'm going to test your respiratory diaphragm, which is if you find the bottom of your sternum, it's right behind that thing called your xiphoid process there on the bottom. So I'm going to test that out for stability. And then I might look at your pelvic floor. I might see how stable that is. So I'm going to use an assessment like that, something that is objective, because I might think, oh, every singer needs to work on their jaw or whatever. But if I think that, I'm probably going to miss something, because that might not be you. That might not be
mhm,
where the actual dominoes are starting. So I will assess these diaphragms of the body through muscle testing, through stability, through balance, through how you walk and how you move, and of course your voice. And then I'm going to go from there, and I'm going to give you drills for what looks like it needs the map. So if you are unstable somewhere or look like you are not able to move well in that area, I'm going to give you a movement for it, and then we're going to reassess. So I'll have heard you sing something, you sang a scale, you sang a part of a song. I'm going to give you the drill, and then I'm going to immediately hear you sing again. And one of my pet peeves in reassessment is giving a drill and then talking about it for 5 minutes and then reassessing, because we don't know what happened at that point. This is
mhm.
reflexive action. If you're listening and you want to think about voice, if you take your fingers, like I said, and put them together as fast as you can maybe go about like 5 times a second when you do that. But an opera singer singing a high C is 1,000 times a second that the vocal folds are opening and closing. That does
Wow.
not sound like something you can consciously control, which is why if you're listening, even if you're not a singer, you may experience that feeling of like, oh, I could never get up and sing a song, or I could never sing happy birthday or whatever. Because it's
Mhm,
very scary. It's a reflexive action that you can't control consciously. And there's a fear around that because we want to control everything in our life. And singing isn't like that. You have to actually give over to the reflex, which is why it's a very brave thing to do, in my opinion.
mhm,
And so we're using that reflex to figure out what happened, because we have to know if this back part of your brain that I mentioned is happy or not. When that part of the brain is not happy, it is burning through all your fuel. You have nothing left to think about where you want to get next year or even tomorrow in your life. You don't have fuel for a long range plan when the stuff in the back isn't working well, because that stuff's going to get fed first because it's keeping you alive. And so singing is this amazing reflex coming out of this brain stem area, and it doesn't lie to you. It tells you the truth. So it is my opinion, if you're listening, even if you're like, I would never want to sing, what if you made a little playlist on for your car and be like, I love these songs. What if I sang with them once in a while? Because it's firstly a really good workout for your brain. And
yes.
secondly, it's something that reveals a lot. When your voice is feeling better, your brain is working better. So I am using that process in the studio. And so I don't want you to talk about it. I want you to do the drill and I want you to sing because I want to know what happened in this reflexive part of your brain. And in my case, for the singers I work with, if it went well, I'm going to tell you before you go on stage, you're going to go backstage and push your tongue up against the roof of your mouth. Or you're going to make this palate exercise and go ah, ah, ah before you go on. Or you're going to do this stretch for your diaphragm. Where you're going to lean over and rotate and you're going to do a hard exhale. Whatever it is I think you need based on how it tested and how you assessed, that's going to be your homework. And I'm going to ask you to do that as soon before you perform as possible because we want to be in that good reflex when you go on stage to play your sport.
Mm, so wonderful. Such a unique, so unique. I love that there's people out there like you, kind of filling the gaps. I was a singer, nobody really knows this, but I was in musical theater for it was 25 shows, right? Never once did anybody tell me about my body, you know? And now even, not singing, I'll sing in the shower occasionally because the acoustics are great. But like, it's also, even if you are not a singer, singing, even if you feel, I'm a little more of a perfectionist, so I'm like, oh, I'm not good enough. Like we have to get that out of our brain because
Yeah,
it's a fabulous just vagal toning exercise, right?
absolutely
A
right.
way to just calm the nervous system. So I think that would be really interesting too. Can you talk a little bit
Yeah,
just vagal toning and, fight,
of course.
flight, freeze, all that fun stuff?
Yeah, so I'm sure a lot of your audience knows the vagus nerve, but it never hurts to hear the basics of it. So the
Always.
vagus nerve is one of your cranial nerves. We have 10 in the brainstem and then two above that, so 12 total. And so it's cranial nerve 10. And so the vagus nerve, it's called the wanderer, vagus in Latin. So it's going from that brainstem I mentioned all the way down to your pelvic area. And it is 80% sensory. So it is mostly getting information from your visceral organs and sending that information back up to the brain, specifically into a place called your insular cortex, which is where your gut function and your gut feelings are stored. So
Yep.
anytime we're dealing with digestive issues, but also I don't know what I should do with my life,
Yeah.
that's in the insular lobe of the brain. And the main conduit into the insular lobe is the vagus nerve. And so
Mhm.
the vagus nerve has this 80% sensory function and 20% motor. And the motor output of the vagus nerve is to your larynx and your pharynx, so your voice box and your throat. And so when we are dealing with singing, what we're dealing with is two specific branches of the vagus nerve. So if you're listening, if you take your fingers behind your ears and trace down to your front of your throat there, that's a nerve called the superior laryngeal nerve. And from your chest back up to your larynx, that's called the recurrent laryngeal nerve. So the only part of the vagus that recurs back up is the recurrent laryngeal nerve. So the recurrent nerve is being used in speaking all day long. If you're listening and you go, ah, 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 that's your recurrent nerve. That's controlling what we know as chest voice in singing, but also lots of other functions of your larynx. What's kind of interesting to know is the superior nerve only works when you sing. So it's not working that much when you're talking, but it's working a lot when you are singing. So for
Mhm.
thinking about vagal tone, and the vagus nerve is parasympathetic and anti-inflammatory. So it's part of your immune function and
Mhm.
your relaxation response. If you're only talking, you are missing a branch of the motor element of your vagus nerve. So again,
Mhm.
even if you think you're not a great singer or you're like, I don't feel good about it, if you pick music that you love and you sing it, you're actually exercising a different branch of your vagus nerve that I'm going to argue is a big part of brain fuel because when you're stuck in fight or flight, everything in your brain and your body in general is the blood vessels are constricting and you're not actually getting as much blood flow as you can. So if you're trying to have better thinking, my opinion is that doing some singing is a really good idea because you're getting different branches of that nerve to activate. And as you said, Shannon, beautifully, it's toning up your vagus nerve. It's actually giving activation to that. That is really unfakeable. And the best way to do it is through your singing voice.
You know, I when I talk to clients, if you don't want to sing, I'll mention humming or gargling,
Great, great. Yeah.
those are great awesome. If you're like, oh, screw singing,
Yeah,
humming, gargling also activate that vagus nerve. And I'm
of
so glad we
course.
talked about this because many women, many people talk, listening to this podcast probably have had some gut issues in the
Yeah.
past. And we refuse to actually believe this vagus nerve that travels, all the way to your gut plays a huge role, right? And so,
Huge. Yeah, the enteric nervous system. Yeah, and as you said, so gargling is called your pharyngeal plexus, which is another branch of the vagus nerve. So if you're like the thought of singing a high note is like the most horrifying thing in the world, be like I can hum and I can gargle. And a good drill for gargling that many people don't do is to gargle for longer. So if you gargle on voice for 30 seconds, you're gonna be like, whoa, this is a bit of a workout. So many people go like, "Ugh, I'm done." And so I encourage you to set yourself a timer and go, I'm actually gonna gargle for 30 seconds. And you will be surprised how much activation you feel with that. But it is a very good exercise for anyone who feels like they are stuck in fight or flight, because when you gargle, you're activating the nerve, the vagus, and its neighboring nerves that are in the back of your throat. And that is going to downregulate your stress response. So it's something so easy. All you need is some water. And if you want to even go even further, what you can do that's pretty cool is to gargle something that has either flavor or carbonation, because that is a separate nerve, something called cranial nerve 9, your glossopharyngeal nerve. And that glossopharyngeal nerve leaves from the same path in your brain. And it's like they're tied together. We say in neuroscience, nerves that fire together wire together. So there's a connection there. So if you're like, I like gargling, that's a cool drill, then you can be like, what if I gargle with something that has carbonation to it or a flavor? And I can notice, do I actually taste that on both sides or feel that on both sides? Because the main thing that's true of functional neuroscience is there's a left and a right nerve. What a lot of people are missing is that I only feel that on the left side. And that is not good, because that means that you are hypo, you're underactive of the nerve in the back, and your stress is up on that side. So what you can do is, if let's say that happens for you, you're like, wow, I actually don't feel my right side at all. It's really simple. You just start to tilt your head around, because that's cranial nerve 11, which kind of sounds like the neighbor to 9 and 10, which it is. And you can actually activate it through its neighbor function. So if you want to try that, you gargle and then you tilt your head until you feel an angle where you feel both sides equally, which everyone will be able to find if you keep messing around. And then that's your drill. You actually tilt your head where you need to get equal function in the back of your throat.
I'm sure people listening to this are having their minds blown right now.
Do it, try it. It's so interesting. Just be like, many times we don't know we're underactive in these nerves, and it's really easy to find out with simple home tests.
Oh yeah. Well, people don't even know they're in fight or flight. People
That's right.
don't even think they're stressed at all. You know, I literally tell
Yep.
clients, I'm just like, at this current moment, unclench your jaw, relax your shoulders. And they're like, oh my
Yep.
God, I didn't like, I'm driving all the time. Unclench my jaw, drop my shoulders,
Yep.
not realize how much stress your body is holding,
That's
right?
absolutely right. Yep.
You know, let alone how our nerves function. You know, we've become so dissociated with our body. And you and I were talking about this too earlier, is how, you know, when we are so stuck in our logic, you know, and our very logical brain, we want to overanalyze, you know, everything. We step out of our body and we ignore our intuition, and we know how our body is supposed to innately function, you know. And so you
Right.
know, simple, we want to overcomplicate it too. Like, what is it, the thing, what are the things I need to do? And it's like, what if just gargling,
Yeah, what if you just gargle?
what if you just gargle, you
Yeah.
know? It seems so simple.
And one thing you said that I think is really good for everyone to hear is that your sympathetics, which is the technical name of fight or flight, is your survival strategy. So every stimulus you have in your day is fed through the sympathetics first, because the question it's always asking is this safe? So when you walk into a room with someone, the first thing you're like, is this person safe? The very first thing that happens. And what we know about researching the sympathetics is that as your metabolic health declines, your reliance on the sympathetics increases, because your brain is trying to keep you alive in this moment, not in 10 minutes and not in 10 years. It's trying to
Mm,
keep you alive right now. And so if you think about like needing CNN or whatever to be blaring out for you, that's sympathetics, right? It's like I need to say, oh my God, I'm activated. And then people don't know that they're stuck in that loop because they're in a survival mode, right? And we can appreciate the amazingness of the nervous system to go, it's literally trying to keep me alive. But when you can't downshift out of the sympathetics, you have to do some gargling or work with you to be like to start to figure out how to get out of that, because it is not a long-term strategy and you will burn out. It is about just staying alive in the moment, but we have
yep,
to have the balance. It's like two sides of a coin. That if
yep,
I'm constantly in sympathetics, I will burn through so much fuel
yep,
of nothing left at the end of the day. And so we have to be able to shift into the parasympathetic system. It's probably good for your listeners to know there are four nerves that control that. So they are cranial nerves 3, 7, 9, and 10. So we already talked about 9 and 10, which is the vagus and the glossopharyngeal. That's the gargling exercise. It's also good to know that the cranial nerve 3, though, is your eyes. So simple things that people don't know of like, am I shutting down my peripheral vision? Am I actually moving my eyes well throughout the day? Am I staring at a screen all day, or am I occasionally looking far away from me? We're so tied into looking really close now that we're starting to burn through fuel in that way. And so moving your eyeballs, so simple, go out for a walk and look around your neighborhood. That should
Mhm.
actually make you feel better. That's
Yes.
a parasympathetic activity. And cranial nerve 7 is your facial expression. So to think about also, how is my social life? Am I actually out with my friends, mirroring their expressions instinctually? That will also make me feel better. I will downshift out of my sympathetics when I actually see human faces and I interact with them and really mirror their expressions. I will leave that interaction feeling more relaxed.
I think this is the number one thing that most people, when they're on a any sort of health journey, entrepreneurial journey, athlete journey, is understanding this. So I'm so glad because you are way more in depth than I could be on the cranial nerves. I'm just like, go gargle salt water, but go outside. But
Yeah,
it's from my viewpoint, a lot of the clients that we work with, it's like they're trying to undo years of metabolic damage, weight loss resistance, thyroid issues, gut issues, hormone issues, autoimmune issues, all these things that seem random, and they're not random. After a while, your body's going to prioritize keeping you alive. It's not
correct.
going to prioritize the fact that you want to lose weight or you want to have a baby. It's not going to
Correct.
prioritize the fact that, even how you look. It's so much deeper than that. So people get a little frustrated, I think, when our logical brain is like, give me the perfect macros, give me the perfect,
Yes.
and it's
Yep.
not that, which is why I love bioenergetic testing because you cannot lie to the body. It literally shows you what the body is. But you
That's right.
eyes. It's like I'll sometimes things the body will ask for an eye scan, and I'm like, I don't like my conscious brain is like,
Yeah.
I would
Why?
ask for an eye scan. And so like understanding those nerves, but
Nerves.
also
Yeah.
they're the windows to the soul, right? And
Right.
that's how we express things, and that's how we observe things too. So yeah, it's fascinating to understand that more, energetic side, but also this very physical, like neurological thing happening too, right?
That's exactly right. And I think you said it perfectly. It's like, to start any health journey with, I have to start from the fact that I'm a survival-based creature. I have
Yep.
to begin every day with that idea to be like, thank you, brain, for keeping me alive.
Yeah.
Instead of being focused only on the targets that I have to go, I have to start with the idea of I'm a survival-based creature. And in my world, I need some kind of assessment of how the survival functions are going. So simple things like how you walk, how you use your eyes, how you balance, how your soft palate moves, where's your tongue in your mouth. These are checklists that I have singers go through, but anyone can go through them to be like, what is happening in this part of my brain that's the survival part of my brain? Because have I missed stuff back there where I'm like, you know what? I get dizzy every time I stand up. Or you know what? I used to be able to read close and now I can't anymore. Have you actually thought about that as a training thing? Because 100% is a training thing, and you can absolutely improve all of those things if you want to. And so then you go, am I burning through all of my fuel back there? So there's nothing left in the front of my brain that's actually trying to heal myself, to have a baby, to lose weight, to figure out what I'm doing with my life. All those things require fuel. And because I'm a survival based creature, the fuel is prioritized in the survival part of the brain that I think many people don't know can be assessed. You can do easy tests, like I said, gargle and be like, I don't feel the right side of my throat. That's an easy test that you can work on to improve the survival part of your brain to make that part feel happier. So it's like, oh, we're okay, we're safe, we're good. Now I can start to spend the fuel on my goals, the things that I want for myself in my life. And I think that's such a powerful lens that I find always useful to talk through because I think it's easy to kind of forget that because like you said we get so focused on we want this thing to happen for ourselves and I'm dealing with people who have a strong goal of like I gotta get on stage tonight and belt a high G, so it's like they have a very clear target, but the targets you're working with are equally clear to be like I want these things for myself. And I do think having that lens of like some kind of assessment of these reflexive parts of the brain is a powerful tool to add on to everything else that folks are doing.
Oh, wonderful. I love that we're on the same wavelength. With tools and things like that, I know that you have resources. I know you have
Yeah,
a website, you have a book. Please tell us about it and like where
sure.
people
Yeah.
can find some additional information.
Totally. So my book will take you through a lot of these tests. So if you want to do them, and there it comes with a video series as well. That's totally free with the book. So
Mm.
if movement is visual, so I take you through absolutely every exercise in the book with it. So it's called The Singing Athlete. You can get it on Amazon if you just search that or just Google. It's thesingingathlete.com. We'll take you to links that you can get the book. You can get it on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Audible. So you can do it as an ebook, as a physical book, or an audiobook. And then my website, thesingingathlete.com, has a bunch of coursework on it as well, where you can do lots of things like a course I mentioned called Bands and Benches, which is about the cerebellum, but lots of other things about getting out of swelling. I have a whole course on lymphatics. I have
Mm.
lots of courses on vocalizing. So if you are a singer and you want to actually learn the scales I do, they're there for you to download. There are several free classes there on vocalizing. So if you want to
Um,
just sing along with me, you got plenty of options there to do that. I have scales for legit singing, which is like high sort of classical singing. I have belt singing, rock singing, all those kinds of things are there for you if you're interested in those genres. And then I also run a program for those who really want to get into this lens, which is called the Singing Athlete Certification. So that is a program that's done both in person and or online. And that's a 3-day class with me where you get to actually go through the book with me. We do a lot more detail, a lot more coaching, a lot more application of the material that's in the book, and for people to really understand how to bring that into their world. And I will say a lot of singing teachers take it, but I've also had body workers take it, Pilates teachers take it, people who do executive coaching take it, people who are looking for just a better lens of how to bring a view of the brain that makes sense to people who want to have these really big goals. And we were talking a little bit before. I do some executive coaching too. And what I just said is so important because there's goal setting and there's things that we want to get to. But I want you to have a way to look at these other parts of the brain and the fuel. And that's how a lot of executive coaches who work with me use the material is to go, well, let me assess your palate. Let me assess your tongue, your jaw. Let me learn these drills so that I can be a more effective coach for you because it's possible that you have a problem in your TMJ or you have a problem moving your diaphragm because of some of your history, and
mhm.
to give them some drills that can start to let them get better speaking and better communication, but also just better goal setting. So that's that program called the Singing Athlete Certification, and that's also you can read about that on thesingingathlete.com.
Wonderful, wonderful. So many great resources for so many different people. Please go check them out. They are amazing. Check out his book, check out his website. If you've enjoyed this conversation, please share it, get his word out. I think it's so wonderful what you do.
Thanks. And one more thing, I'm also on Instagram. If you want to see videos of me working with singers, it's just at Singing Athlete. So that's if you want to see some examples of how I work with singers, there's tons up there.
Oh, perfect. So I will link his website, his book, and I'll link your Instagram and the show notes as well. So that way it's easy to find you. And I want to thank you again for coming on the podcast. I think this is wonderful. If you found it valuable, I always appreciate you sharing it, leaving a review. It definitely helps us figure out what resonates really well with you and keep creating content that's, you guys love to hear. So until next time, thank you again, Andrew, for being here.
Thanks.